Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism with Mick Mulroy and myself, Adam Piercy. Today we were doing a topic that Mick had mentioned, and I think has been very big within the social media and news sphere for a while, which is this idea of the anti-science movement, or I think in some ways I would also characterize it as anti-intellectual. But I think anti-science is a big one here. It's been a recurring topic throughout most of the last couple of years, especially throughout COVID and the pandemic and the vaccinations and stuff like that. And even in my world and work, as we get back to returning to the moon with the launch of Artemis 2 coming up soon and lunar landings planned in the near future, there's a lot of discussion that sounds very anti-science and anti-information. So, it's a good topic for us today. It's a relevant topic and a current events type of thing. So Mick, why don't you lead us out with some points that you wanted to start with today?
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Good to be back with you. I mean, when it comes to this, I think as a kid, I mentioned my dad was a scientist. He was a biologist and then a neuroscientist. And I grew up, with the philosophy. And I always thought like part of being a Stoic was to be a scientist. And I don't mean that in a professional, like you have to be in a professional sense, like every Stoic has to be a scientist. That's obviously not the case. But like an amateur scientist for two things. You should be interested in the natural world, just as a human, right? And the scientific method is the best way, in my opinion, to learn, right?
Yeah.
You don't just come with preconceived notions. You don't stick with your preconceived notions in the face of alternative facts. You don't decide things by just emotion.
Yeah.
You test a theory. If the theory is wrong, you should to be a good Stoic, in my opinion, you should at times in your life be able to say out loud, I was wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Like I thought this, I was wrong. And now I think this because I got different facts. And I think it's not just the anti-science movement, which is extremely, in my opinion, bad for society. And we'll get into some of the key points of that. But it's also just expert, or you said intellectual. Like all of a sudden, because you read an article on Facebook written by somebody who wasn't a scientist, that more about a virology, about immunity and vaccines than a virologist, right? That spent their entire life studying the effects of viruses and how we can counter it with vaccines, right? So that and then they just don't like the person because they're an expert, like they're some kind of snot or something because they got a PhD in climate science for them. I mean, there's so many. Like it's, and then it's, oh man, so or they use things like, oh well, it got warm, on Tuesday and it's December, or so, or the opposite, right? So it's too cold now. So where's your global warming, you idiots? And those kind of like snide remarks based on anecdotal stuff and not using the scientific method like data over time, and I think that is something that Stoicism could do to really help society if they taught that part of what I think is, logos, right? The reason. Everybody can reason, which to me means reasoning means you look at facts as they are, not as you want them to be.
Sure.
If you have a theory, you test it. If the theory is wrong, you admit it, and then you go to the next, right? So, and it's going to have a major impact on society. So climate change is happening and humans are having an impact, right? It's just a fact. Also, climate change just happens. Like even before humans were a thing, we had radical changes in the environment. So if it's happening, we need to test it, and it is, and we need to adjust either to reduce our impact on it and to live with it, right? Because we're getting in a scenario where we're the frog in the kettle, and
Yeah.
it's warming up, buddy.
Yeah.
And people denying it is it's just like if you have an issue, right? Like you're an alcoholic, something, the first thing is admitting it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you need people to admit we have an issue.
Yeah.
And then you need people to do something about it, because just having an issue is not going to help. And I'm concerned. I mean, we could talk about climate change all in of itself, but in this context, we need people to start looking at the science, accepting the science, both sides. Not over exaggerating either, because you want somebody to contribute to your Save the Earth fund, and then doing something about it. And I think Stoicism and logos, the idea of human reasoning, and that everybody, and I started writing down my quotes so I don't become the guy that like screws up every quote I try to remember, but it was one from Epictetus specifically that on reason, which was pretty simplistic, but goes, I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. Reason is what makes us human. So,
yes. And I think it's
Epictetus.
And I think it's a really poignant quote to bring from someone who is a slave and is educated, like willfully educated by his slave owner, is my understanding. And he's allowed to go to lectures and stuff like that, right? Because at the end of the day, the thing that I think Epictetus would always believe is that education and information sets us free. In fact, there's a quote from Epictetus's Discourses, which of course I'm trying to get the quote up here now, but there is a quote from Epictetus Discourses where in terms of education, it's an interesting kind of thing that he says. He says, the masses, this is from, I believe this is from the Discourses. He says, the masses are wrong to say that only freeborn men are entitled to an education. Believe the philosophers instead, who say that only educated people are entitled to be called free. So when we are looking at things like, climate change, which affects all of us, right? Yeah, I think it's a great quote. When we're looking at climate change or something like that, right? Like willful ignorance is actually trapping us in a situation that is bad, right? Especially, and it might not be willful, but let's just say ignorance of the science, ignorance of being able to know that somebody else probably knows something more than we do about something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing to take away here. It's not lost on either of us for sure that one of the 4 Stoic virtues is wisdom, because without wisdom you get nothing. In fact, Socrates said that any virtue is just a branch of wisdom. So courage is wisdom to know that you need to do this, or justice is wisdom of knowing that every man is not your enemy, right? And et cetera, and you can go down the line. And for wisdom to be so important to not only our progenitor but to the original Stoics, right, that are happening, that who created the philosophy, and it's happening in a space that is Socrates was living in before them, right, in Athens, right. I think there has to be a hard connecting line between those sort of things, because it's too simple to say that well, I don't know anything about that, but this is what I'm seeing in front of me. But that's a type of science that's so old, right? Like like to just say, well, it's cold outside, so we're not warming up. But the fact is, science and all of that is far bigger of a topic. So, but I think something I would love to talk about as well is just this idea of not just anti-science but anti-intellectual. Like we have people that are trying to help us, right? And not just there's the easy ones out there, your Bill Nye or your Neil deGrasse Tyson or your I can't remember his name, but the evolutionary biologist who sort of has been taking on from Darwin. He's English as well. But the thing is that there's a real movement against these people sharing their knowledge as well. Like it's being snooty or that it's rude to kind of share that. And I struggle with that because when you learn from Marcus and Epictetus and Seneca, right, they all went to lectures on their philosophy, and they intentionally went. Like, there was a quote I remember hearing from Ryan Holiday's book about wisdom, where he said, there's a story from, I don't know who it was, it might have been Fronto, but it's like, about how Marcus is in court, essentially in the court of his empire, and he decrees something and has a meeting, and then he picks up his books, his tablets, as they would say, and he walks off to hear a lecture on philosophy. And this is the most powerful man in the world saying, I don't know everything and I need to learn.
Right.
And the anti-intellectual side of the anti-science movement to me is also quite scary, because it would mean, like, if people, like, even people that do know stuff, they just can't, they're being boxed out by people who just either don't want to know or don't care.
Yeah, because everybody could, in my opinion, should be an intellectual. Like, the way I view intellectual is somebody who's in constant pursuit of becoming wiser, right? Doesn't mean you're, a professor at, Harvard or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be, yeah,
Sure.
but you could also be, a guy who, is a carpenter and just, just wants to read a book on astrology, and then wants to read a book on human genetics, and like, you want to learn, and it's not just because of what you do. And I think it's really right, because the one thing I've noticed in people, really men especially as they get older, but I imagine it's both men and women, is they don't like to do things that they're not good at. Right. So they don't want to engage in a conversation about space travel with you necessarily, because they know a lot and they don't know shit. Like, that's you know what I mean? Like, when in actuality, that's exactly who they should want to talk to, right? Because they don't know. And an intellectual, at least in my definition of it, is somebody who's like, oh, I get a chance to talk to Adam about human spaceflight. I'm gonna take every amount of time that he has willing to give me, and I'm gonna learn a lot more than I would have if I was talking to somebody else. You get my point? Sure. Like, but then they take it another step forward, worse, right? They don't want to talk to you because they don't know enough, and then they want to make you like into some kind of bad person or thing because you are an expert at something. It's like two steps removed from what they should be doing, or what.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you a funny story. I was at a wedding a couple of years ago, and I was there by myself, and I was sat at a table with some coworker, because I knew this person through work. I was sat at a table with some ex coworkers, and the one coworker's partner, then boyfriend, he started asking me questions about space, but not like, what's it like working with the space program? Questions like, do you think there's aliens? And they knew that I worked with robotics. And so it was like, they said, how far do you think we are from the Terminator? And I always have that joke of like, why do we always go there? Like, why can't it be like, why aren't we at Data from Star Trek? But anyways, right. So I got all these questions. It was really interesting to me, because someone later on was like, I'm really sorry about that guy. Like, you've been answering his questions for over an hour, and some of these are pretty crazy. And I said, actually, here's my take on it. I don't mind that he's asking me questions. I don't mind that he is putting me in a weird spot. I'll be honest, it was weird, where it's like, do you think UFOs are real? And I'm like, well, depending on the semantics of the argument, the answer is absolutely yes, right? Because obviously people have seen stuff they can't identify. Right. But at the same time, right, I would rather someone ask the question and have the dialogue. And this is what actually one of the reasons why you and I started this podcast, because I would rather have the dialogue than have someone do what you were suggesting, where they're like, well, I'm too old for this shit and I can't learn. Right. And I'm like, oh, that is not better to me. I would rather sit in the discomfort and go, okay, here's my view on this. Right. And have someone disagree with me or flat out argue with me on it, than the reverse, where someone's like, well, I think there's lizards running the universe and blah, 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 and it's turtles all the way down. And then you go, okay, but then what about this other stuff? And they go, nope, I don't want to know about it. Like, in some ways, the anti-science movement is a chosen ignorance movement, where people are saying, I don't want to know. I'm too old for this shit and I can't learn it. And I'm always like, but that's the worst part to be in. One of my earliest philosophical practices when I joined in the Stoicism world of Stoicism as well was Zen concept called Shoshin, which stands for beginner's mind. And it comes from the parable, which is the mind of the beginner has many questions and the mind of the expert has few. And I as a beginner, learned far more by asking those questions, and everybody would, rather than saying, no, I'm a pro at this. And I very commonly tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm an expert at nothing. I've got experience, but so ask me the question. So, but yeah, there's this anti-intellectual thing, which also almost becomes chosen ignorance. And that to me is almost worse. So,
yeah, it is. And, I mean, I'm somewhat known as you are for Stoicism. So when people at parties, they bring up Stoicism a lot.
Oh yeah.
Which is cool because, I obviously dig talking about Stoicism, but sometimes I'm thinking like, I want to talk to somebody about something I don't know anything about, In fact, I think that a lot. The other thing I don't do is I don't tell people I was in the CIA anymore because, man, you get some crazy. You think you get crazy questions? I actually get the same questions, of course. But like on planes, I obviously didn't tell people when I was in because I was covert, but I'm over it now. So I just figure, just be honest with people. Now I'm like, nope, don't tell random people you're in the CIA.
Yeah. Well, I have it when you get crazy people. Yeah. I mean, look, I've had it happen. So like I have a phased approach to talking about what I do for work. Like if I'm at a wedding and I meet someone I don't know at all, right?
Yep.
And I really don't want to talk about it. And they'll say, what do you do for work? And I'll say, I work in engineering. And then how they feel about it. If you say that and they go, oh, cool. Then you go, all right, I'm done. But it would happen. I had someone in my life who would introduce she would introduce me, and then someone would ask me what I do for a living, and I would kind of look at her, and she would go, "Oh, he has a really cool job," and then I'd be like, "Okay, now I'm prompted to be the space guy." So you have to weigh that out.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. I was trying to. I knew I had a good quote on this one, so this is actually Marcus Aurelius' quote on ignorance, which is. Book 6, section 21. If any man is able to convince me and show me that I do not think or act right, I will gladly change. For I seek the truth, by which no man was ever injured. But he is injured who abides in his error and ignorance.
Yep.
And I think it's pretty clear what side of the line Marcus would be on when it comes to
it just seems to me that almost the entirety of the philosophy is counter to the anti-science movement. Like it's like if there was a flip side to the anti-science, it would be the philosophy of Stoicism. And part of, and I kind of alluded to this already. Part of Stoicism in general is humility.
Yeah.
Right. Being humble and living humbly and modestly.
Yeah.
It's not being ostentatious, and it's not having it's not being arrogant at all. Right. But but there's a lot of arrogance to people who, not only won't change their opinion in the face of facts, but they don't have any facts to back up their opinion, or they just manipulate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, there's plenty of Stoics that are religious. Always has been. I know plenty, especially Catholics. But but to say that there's now a museum, I think it's in Alabama, where they have humans with dinosaurs.
Right.
It's like, wow. So, and you could say, okay, man, it's my religion, and I obviously don't want to criticize people's religion.
Right.
But when you try to promote something that's clearly erroneous, and then want kids to go in there and teach them something that is obviously proven by science to be wrong, just to try to fit the particular creationism story that you were told,
right?
It's just wrong. Like, you can believe what you want,
right?
But it's something I use all the time. I think it was an old senator here, as Monahan used to say, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, right? So that is not the opposite of humble. It's arrogant, and it's to a point where it's caustic to teach people something that's not true to fit your belief or opinion.
Yeah, I think so. And there's like a Stoic's first priority around wisdom is to the truth, right? Wisdom is like street smarts, right? It's not knowledge. It's not It's sort of knowledge applied with, this is one of the reasons why I was glad to have the applied stoicism part of our name put in there when we did it, right? Like it's applied knowledge with experience and with screwing it up sometimes, right? Like, but it's not, I think it's important to note that we can all have beliefs and that's fine, but to be unable to change that belief, despite evidence that's been presented, that's really tough, for I think anybody within Stoicism to think about, because let's ignore the science part about it in terms of like, creationism or evolution or climate change or, what's at the center of the galaxy, right? The mere fact that we have to take into account at all times in this discussion is that it starts with ourselves, right? And our own personal truth. So if you were a Stoic, for example, and you were ignoring behaviors, or you were ignoring um, your gut feeling about something, right? You would be essentially violating your own truth and wisdom about yourself, right? Like Marcus says very clearly, and I don't have to quote it because it's a very well-known quote, which is like, if it is not right, do not say it. If it's not right, do not do it, right? Or I might even say, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. And it's some version of that. And, I think it's one of those things where it's a personal truth that you have to hold yourself accountable for. And that's the decision I think that we make as pursuing wisdom in this way, right? Like, there's a common knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And that's pretty, I think that's pretty clear here, right? Like we can have that. The interesting thing I would say to close this off, though, is the personal truth of saying, look, I'm in Texas and it's minus 20 Celsius. That is true. And that is something to take into account. But to disregard that in the greater scheme of things without all this other evidence and data, I think that's willfully choosing not to follow the.
And you take it to an extreme. Take the anti-medical science bunch, the anti-vaxxers and stuff.
Right.
So, as you probably know, we have an anti-vaxxer who's in charge of this the CDC.
Yeah.
Right. So somehow we ended up with a guy who's not a scientist, who promotes clearly erroneous theories that are not only not backed up by science, but they're countered by science, who's now running the very group that so it goes beyond. Like, if, for example, if somebody for whatever reason thinks all this crazy stuff about vaccines and they don't want to take a vaccine, okay, it doesn't help the rest of us, because if you know how a vaccine works, it's if you willfully stay away from vaccines, you can help spread the actual virus that can hurt or even kill people that did take the vaccine, right? And I'm not a virologist. I just happen to listen to them when they talk. But when you get in a position to then injure other people because of your anti-science and anti-intellectual expert, if you will, right? They don't like the expert because the expert told them what to do to save themselves and the rest of the country. I'm not for forcing people necessarily, but here's the thing. I mean, COVID, I don't know what its kill rate was, but relatively low. What if COVID killed 55% of everybody that was infected?
Right.
Everybody would be telling everybody you're taking a shot whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So and we got to talk about this, because I imagine the world is not done with major epidemics, pandemics, right?
Yeah.
So right now people are okay. Well, I'm not going to make people take vaccines if it's such a low lethality rate. But if it was much higher, people would change their tune.
Right.
They don't want to hear. They wouldn't want to hear the JFK Juniors of the world. They'd say, look, you're actually causing people, and not like the measles is coming back in weird places around the country.
Oh, measles is coming back is so scary. Like the MMR vaccine is a very prominent one you get here in stages in Canada, and we don't have that. But there are parts of Canada that are seeing a measles spike, and you can see on the line as the reduction in use of the MMR vaccine is being used for children, the measles rate is going up. So they're doing this, right. And that's really That's scary, but I think there's a responsibility there, right? Like, we should talk about something that I think not a lot of people talk about, and you and I have talked about this with education and stuff, which is that when we have to be very clear of our responsibility as we impress these things upon like kids and youths, for sure, as we do this. So anti-science in many ways is people saying, it's always interpreted in many ways of people saying anti-evolution or anti vaccines or something like that. But one of the things that I get very nervous about with anti-science is it's the anti-scientific process. It's anti-rational process, right? Like, Socrates did not know what a molecule was. He knew there was something called an atom because he knew that you could get to a point where you couldn't divide matter any further, although of course that was wrong. You can do that. It just creates a lot of energy.
Right.
But the thing is that, he had the ability to think rationally. And I would say, like, if Socrates was presented with this evidence today, right, he would be able to probably, like, okay, he doesn't have all the other education, but if all that was not there, he would at least be able to rationalize that this is probably true, right? Because of that process of thinking critically. Critical thinking is a lot of the times the word that you use. And I'm nervous that the anti-science movement is going to become this movement of, well, I've done my research, and it's like 2 YouTube videos and a Wikipedia article, right? Which frankly is not research, because people are ignoring the fact that most of the time scientists are wrong. I will be honest, very honest with you on that one. Most of the time scientists are investigating stuff and they have a theory and it's wrong all the time. Like, they're wrong more often than they're right. It's one of the reasons why most, you see, Nobel Prize winners for chemistry or physics or whatever, they get it when they're like in their 60s, because they found something out when they were 30 and they spent 30 years trying to prove it and they kept getting it wrong, right? And at some point, that's where I get really scared with this, because we're talking about measles, right? Like, the key application of the MMR vaccine is to kids, because it's just like, you got them in a school, you can do that, and measles for youth is very dangerous, right? And so if we get to the point where this anti-science, anti-intellectual movement becomes, anti-education, anti-rational thought, which they're not going to say is what they believe, but that's what it sounds like, right? That's the point where you kind of go, well, then I'm worried that we're already going downhill at that point, because the key difference that sets us as human beings apart from the great apes is our ability to think rational thoughts and investigate science. And when that goes away, you get stuck, right?
Yeah.
There's no way to say no. There's no way to say, like, the number one thing every scientist will tell you they say is, I don't know, but let's figure it out. Right.
Right. Which is, comes straight down from Socrates. Right. And part of, what I'm concerned about is people get exhausted with other people. People are going to get exhausted with anti-science people, and they're just going to bifurcate society. And people are going to say, and that's already happening, right? So this isn't, I guess I shouldn't say, so it's already happened. It happened politically now. And, obviously the anti-science movement does have aspects of it that's political, right? What's going to happen, I'm concerned about, is the people that are more in line with the way we're talking, right?
Yes.
That everybody should be a scientist, right? Everybody should seek wisdom. They should seek to know other things. They should, yes, test science, ask why they believe it to be true. That's what scientists do, but also accept it then when it is, because it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that the discussions are going to stop happening, and we're just going to go to our, people like you and I and other people will live in one place, and people who are the opposite will live in the other. And then the children that get raised in that place will never really have the opportunity to learn, because, part of the anti-science is, this is what it is. Don't question it,
right.
Because if you question it, it all falls apart, right? So they just say, this is what it is. And then, just, that's what I'm telling you. Your job is not to question it. Your job is to accept it, repeat it. And that is not good for their society. It's not good for children. Children don't get a chance. They don't get a chance to, do great things, win the Nobel Prize one day, because they were basically told, don't question it. And if you can't question, you're not going to be a scientist, right? You're not going to be any kind of big thinker.
Right.
So that's, what do we do about that? It's education. It's how you run your education system which is also under challenge in the United States.
Yeah, and you see this happen so much, right? Where you see it where people who are they're taking an anti-science stance, in the sense of it's not that it's not that they don't know what science is in many ways, but when they do an anti-vaccination thing, right, they'll be like, well, question everything, don't be sheeple or something like that. And the interesting thing is, when you talk to scientists, when you talk to, I'll call them intellectuals again, or people who believe in the Enlightenment, maybe is a better way to put it. Those are people who will constantly say, yes, question everything. But questioning everything also doesn't mean that you trust nothing, right? There's evidentiary based stuff that you can follow. And in many cases, you don't have to be a chemical engineer or a microbiologist to figure out how this stuff works. It's just a case of understanding that sometimes somebody knows more than you do. And this is how it kind of comes together. Like there was a big recently done vaccine study out of, I think it was Denmark or Holland, where they studied like 10 million kids over 10 years or whatever. And there's no, or over 30 or 40 years. And there's no link between vaccines and autism, which comes up all the time. And you kind of go, well, there's that. I mean, that doesn't mean that it's, is there some error to that? Sure. But is it probably true? Well, I mean, there's a lot of data to look at there, but at the same time, if you disregard it and say, question everything, and that, it can also swing the other way, where you have no ability to rationally think that anything is true. Well, in that case, this is all the Matrix.
Yeah, we're in the Matrix. Yeah, I knew that was coming. I got that question. That's why I don't tell people I was in the CIA. Yeah, no, I agree. You also got to accept what is actually true. And I mean, think about it. Like, the way society works, you have to actually rely on other persons. I don't even know how it is that we're talking right now. Like, I mean, I get the concept in general, but somebody else knows exactly how this is working. And if it wasn't for those people, we wouldn't be doing this. Like, that's society. I can't, like, you can't. My dad used to be able to pull the engine out of his van, his hippie van and stuff, and fix it. You can't do that today, man. You need like a PhD.
Yeah, right? I know.
So you have to rely on other people, experts, including scientists, including engineers, including people that know how to fix a car or fix your HVAC. Right? Live in the South and not have air conditioning. So it's like, you have to be able to do this to society. I mean, people do it. But then they for whatever reason, they fall into these conspiracies, these emotionally driven, which is obviously not, it's the opposite of Stoic, emotionally driven responses that, and it's also the advent of social media, influencers, right? People react to what is emotional. You see what I mean? Like, so if you put out that, hey, they're all these crazy mad scientists are promoting vaccines because they get money for each or whatever it is, and really they're trying to kill your kids, right? So people get react because it's emotional.
Well, I saw that meme, and it was funny because I saw a comment under that meme one time where some scientist was like, "Where's all this money? Where could somebody tell me where this money is?" Because most of the time the scientific community is very underfunded, and I was like, "Where's all this?" And they're like, "Where's all this money?" But you're right. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're in. Like, I shudder to think, social media and the internet it has given us access to literally the unlimited wealth of knowledge that we have as humans, but we spend most of the time looking at cat videos, right? So anyways, so we should wrap up there. But I think the stance is pretty clear about the fact that I think Stoics would would they understand science the way we know it? No. But would they be pro-science? I mean, absolutely. The literal data is far too evidentiary to say that they wouldn't. But we should pause there and continue on with going further. We'd love to hear from our audience and our other members. So please let us know what you think. Mick and I ourselves aren't scientists ourselves, but we are pro-science in terms of the scientific method and everything, at least, as I would say. So Mick, any closing thoughts for us today?
Yes. Stoic challenge of the day or week or life. Don't just read about and talk about what you know.
Yeah.
When you get on a plane, like I have to all the time, go to the documentary section and go to something you don't know anything about, or pick up a book and about something you don't know anything about. That's what the in a positive sense, what I think the opposite of the anti-science, anti-intellectual movement is people who deliberately want to know about things that they do not know. The simple purpose of becoming wise.
Great point to close on. So take care of everyone else, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers, Mick.
Launch. Thank you for listening to the Pup and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pupandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pupandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pup and Porch out.